This is the beginning. This is the Genesis panel. This is Brave New Worlds. Genesis is basically like the combination of tech that they're using to create worlds now. This was my least anticipated panel out of the entire con, but it walked away as like one of my best. Yeah, very underrated panel. I was a little bit like, oh, they're just gonna be talking about more tech. You know, it's another tech pitch to the industry. But honestly, it was a very good panel overall. And it really, when you actually look at it and think about it, it's actually integral to elements of the gameplay that's coming with 1.0.
Without me waffling on, I'd like to bring CIG's CTO, Benoit Bezajeur. Did I say it right, Benoit? Yeah, okay, good. I'm always bad with French surnames.
Bezajeur.
Start our journey into the future.
It is a tough one to say.
Let's have a great show.
One thing I will say is that Chris Roberts had it felt like Chris Roberts had a small part in this CitizenCon. Did anyone else feel a bit like that? He kind of stepped back a little bit. He didn't really make any crazy statements. He didn't like get emotional on stage. He was kind of like the intermediary for this year. He really did, BB. Yeah, he handed over the reins to the people who are, you know, on the front lines, I guess. He also read from the prompts way more. He read from the prompts. Yeah, he was contained this year. And I could really sense that. I think after last year, don't know why, because last year he did say, you know, everything you see is going to be in the next 12 months. He did cry, you know, he did get emotional about server meshing and everything. But none of that was like out of line. He was way more tame compared to previous years. But this year, I don't know, felt like he kind of just didn't want much. He wanted to stay out of the limelight a little bit this year and kind of let a lot of it speak for himself and let the game devs do their thing. I think Richard Tyra is probably doing such a great job now. I think Chris, like I said before, like a week ago, I think Chris loves Rich Tyra. I think Rich Tyra and Chris are a really good team. And I think Rich Tyra gives Chris a lot of confidence. And I think Chris feels like the game is in really good hands these days.
Today, we will talk about Brave New Worlds. This is Pyro 2, Monox. It's a barren planet, not really habitable.
I can't unhear Umox
planet tech,
from Star Trek.
We've always allowed players
to
circumnavigate planets and move from orbit to ground seamlessly, explore complex areas in intricate detail. Now, with server meshing, we're going to need a lot more locations for missions and destinations for more life.
Yes, we are.
But there's a major question that has always followed this project since the beginning of Alpha 3.0. How are we going to make a large number of planets and systems? How are we going to meet the fidelity benchmark we've established? In this technology update, we bring life to lifelessness, even to Monax. We take the physical representation of the terrain, the geology, the atmosphere, the climate, and the environment to create accurate biomes that spring naturally from the collision of all these environments. Coherent, denser biomes that follow the laws of nature that we encode into data. Data that we then leverage to place flora and fauna, yes, but also settlements, buildings, alien and human life in a planetary context.
This was one of my biggest headaches.
Scientifically plausible, richer in gameplay opportunities.
With this game, like how you have this giant universe, huge planets and moons. How are you going to fill these with content? Obviously, the only way they could ever do it was with some sort of procedural generation. But the tool that they've built here is all about doing it with a little bit more finesse.
On the planets, without a quantum point.
Oh, huge implications, Roscoe. I think a lot of people are sleeping on it. If what I've heard is true, that people thought the panel was bad, like it has huge implications for the future of the game on a just systemic level. Like just it can tie into so much actual gameplay and content.
To define actions along your path. For this, we are changing how we made the game. We are scaling how we made the game in all areas. This is not just a Planet Tech update. This is a collection of systems that we call
Stellic. That's hilarious. Genesis.
Now, to help me explain all this nice work and this nice technology, let us kick us off And I welcome our very own Ali Brown and Will Hine for phase 1 of Genesis.
Genesis, these nuts. Well, so that was the point, right? That they can, the system will hopefully, when it comes to buildings all looking the same, the system has lots of pre-made assets and modules to mix it up. Obviously, you're bound to see some that look the same. But
Yes, hello, CitizenCon.
are you going to visit every single one?
So let's start with some introductions. This guy over here is Will Hine, aka Water Guy or River Guy.
And this lovely gentleman is Ali Brown, pusher of pixels extraordinaire.
And we're here to tell you about phase 1 of Genesis, which we're entitling The Laws of Nature. And this revolves around the fundamental approach we use to build our planet, and is the literal foundation for everything else we're going to talk about in this talk today. Now, it centers on data-driven, physically based rules that we aim to realistically emulate nature and its incredible diversity. Before we dive in a bit deeper, let's just recap on some of the things we already have on our planet. So here you can see our lovely atmosphere.
Going to make planets. Wonderful. That's what I said to Chris and his team.
And our cloud rendering, which can provide some spectacular views. We have our on-the-fly terrain generation, which is no loading screens in our game, which we're very proud of. And then we have our scattering system that can populate these planets with many different diverse biomes. And we've been setting quality benchmarks for each of these biomes as we come across them one by one.
That desert one, I don't think I've even seen.
This scene on Microtech, it looks great, but it's not getting the same density that you'd expect from a real pine forest. That's one of the things we want to solve. The other, if I take you to the other side of Microtech, you'd be excused if you thought we'd just turned around and looked at a different part of the forest.
Yeah, looks the same.
Why is that? Well, this is because currently our artists create slices of biomes in great number, and then they distribute them across the planet using humidity and temperature properties. Each slice looks great in isolation, as you've seen, as you've explored.
I don't know, Cascal.
To give us varied and natural
I don't know what the time frame is for this.
Additionally,
or if it's already been
using
used.
humidity and temperature limits us to only 2 degrees of variation. And that's not enough for the sorts of planets and worlds that we want to create and for you to explore.
So how are we going to scale up our planet generation?
2 years?
Well,
is this part of the 12 to 18 months estimate that we got, though? Or is that your guess, Raven?
We're going to start with physically based rules that drive everything. We want nothing to feel random on these planets. We want no limitations on the number of biomes. We want infinite biomes that are continuously changing across the planets. And we want extreme density, and we want to maintain or exceed all of the quality levels we've set with our existing biomes. And most importantly, we want it to be scalable so that we can really scale up to the level of content that the designers are expecting. And from your perspective, we want you to be able to truly explore and find unique playing opportunities everywhere on our planets. So to start this, we're going to need more data. So if we see here some of our existing data sets on our planets, we have temperature, which we define locally and globally, and humidity, and that's it for now.
Temperature,
With
humidity.
Genesis,
So temperature, humidity is the only data they use at the moment?
we add many other data sets, such as the geology type, the soil type, and then we also go for things like the soil depth and the quality and the nutrients, and many other properties all drive this complex data set that we use to build rule sets on that each individual asset can describe how it should work with them.
Yeah, so that's that's very interesting. The Genesis, it's introducing data variables such as soil, geology, etc. And the reason for these, obviously, right, is because, as explained in day 2, and we'll be watching that one at some point, not tonight, but another stream. Day 2, obviously, is all about crafting and resource extraction and building and things. This system is a huge tool for just creating planetary scale, natural looking, like cohesive resource deposits and nodes on like a galaxy-wide system-wide scale. It's a very smart way of doing it. You know, I initially was like, oh, they're spending so much time on tools. I feel like they're wasting so much time on tools. But this is, you know, they can save so much time further down the line with this system, with this tech, with Genesis. It's just going to create all that content, all that natural resource acquisition deposits as part of just the game, the way they develop systems and planets moving forward. Which is why this is so important. Which is why the Genesis panel is more important than I guess some people might think. I think most people realize that this is very, very important for the future of the game and the game play. It's not just for making planets look pretty and moons look pretty and things feel immersive. It actually has huge gameplay implications, and they'll talk more about that in a minute. Some of the other gameplay implications that come from this.
We're going to put something together and show you some demos today using some of the assets that you've already know and love in the PU. Although you might see some new stuff later, we'll save that.
A lot of it being in Greybox was really reassuring.
It's very early stages, very work in progress. You might see some bugs, but that means it's only going to get better, so be excited. The number one challenge with planets in our game is scale. In no other context,
it doesn't sideshow, but
great from first
they
do
when you're talk about trees. Actual content
when you're in a spaceship
that they can put in
miles away
with this system as well.
Everywhere in between,
content light, there still needs to be some curated content, definitely throughout all the planets and all these places, but there will also be, I think initially at least, a lot of these places will use repeatable content, which is still way better than what we have now, which is absolutely nothing. No locations, no points of interest, no resource deposits, nothing to find, nothing to look for. This we haven't even got there yet on this panel, but there's a lot more that this will be adding. We'll talk about it when we get there. Phoenix, what's up? Good to see you. Disposable, good evening, guten tag, my man. Great to meet you again.
There are no loading screens. You see everything.
I agree, Sideshow. There definitely needs to be looting everything.
Scenarios. So let's start from a ground perspective. Demo number 1. Let's have a look.
But we obviously don't have the high quality panels, so some of this is a little bit pixelated. CIG's putting up the panels now, but it takes usually like a week to get them all up. The density of these forests and things, where the hell are you going to land anymore? You're definitely not going to drive through these places. I know with Maelstrom, I don't know if Maelstrom comes into the equation here, being able to like blast landing zones clear. Thank you very much, Disposable. I appreciate that, dude. The tier 3, 83 months. Thank you, sir.
So, how do we make that?
Oh, is this panel on YouTube now, Glitch? 4K?
So, let's talk about first what's underneath it all. The ground!
Can you link it?
So,
the ground.
In our previous terrain shader, we just switched between different ground textures depending on climate and didn't really consider the unique properties of each type. Now, the terrain shader is based around 4 layers. We always first consider bedrock at the bottom.
Okay, let me just grab the higher quality. I didn't know they put this one up already. Was that just today?
But that's not what filled most of the screen in that demo. That's the vegetation. Like what Ali said, we want to emulate the laws of nature. So in Genesis, we have rule sets for every asset that tells it how to respond to our rich data, whether it be soil type, water availability, temperature, geology, or whatever. We assess the viability and the vitality of each asset and compare them to decide what is likely to spawn in a natural environment. This automatically creates the cohesive environments that you saw in that clip. Not handcrafted anymore. No one has told those ferns and those pines to be like that. They each want to be like that.
Very
and that's what
cool.
we're doing. Multiple assets coming together to create a unique micro.
You're going to need gardeners. You're going to need gardeners in Star Citizen. If they let us like destruct flora and stuff, which I actually don't know if you can. I don't know if I've ever seen that in Maelstrom, but you're gonna need gardeners. You're gonna need tree surgeons to clear out areas and keep the weeds at bay. You're gonna need them.
What about trees then? Same thing. They have a larger requirement for space. They have a larger requirement for nutrients. That's how you see the distribution, and it's how it all works.
Yes, Piggy. What's up, buddy? How are you?
Let's meet the flora that came together to beat that forest, to make that forest, and have a look at some of their properties. Now, just to note, they are all going to look quite similar because we've already seen them in the same place.
Agree, Melikin.
So, building blocks, like grass and common grass, medium amounts of sunlight. We had ferns, see it's a much lower requirement for sunlight. We had salix bushes forming our undergrowth. And we had pines, of course, and multiple variations of pines. Diversity is driven by competition. Everything has ideal conditions, which affects its competitiveness. We also have additional control over this in the form of dominance, which allows us to make one asset more competitive and more dominant than another, which is just what we see in nature. Everything is constantly fighting for resources and, of course, light. Because we spawn these assets in a hierarchy, it's easy to propagate shade data down over the distribution of the assets so that we can control ones that prefer or reject shade. Often, like these ferns, they can spawn in light, but they are outcompeted in those scenarios most of the time. So you will see a rogue fern or a place where there's no seeds for a specific asset, you might start to get this coming in. Let's take a look from a larger perspective again.
Thank you, Online. The best gameplay. The density of these trees, good God, man, it scares the hell out of me. Tanks? Rip. Yeah, Hi-Fi, a lot of really cool orc stuff coming as well. All right, Mercury, take it easy, buddy. Well, if you could knock them down with tanks, I'd be really surprised, but I know this is just for demo purposes, but man, all those rocks and trees, no-go zone for ground vehicles. The one tree on the mountain. Yeah, that was one dominant species. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. So they literally have, these variables that determine what grows where. They don't have to place anything manually, just these variables based on the climate, shade, the temperature, where they are, is what determines what grows and what's the dominant species. I mean, it's probably going to be very basic in the beginning, but still a really cool prospect.
So, to take you through some of the things we saw in that clip,
let's talk Thank you for the follow.
Rocks first. So, anyone that's done a lot of ground driving and ground vehicles might have seen that our rocks sometimes feel a little bit randomly scattered, and it can be quite an obstacle sometimes. So, in this clip, you saw that the rocks are no longer randomly scattered, and they're now placed based on physically based rule sets. And this logical grouping is achieved via erosion simulations, which we run offline to build localized data maps. And they describe the size of the aggregate and rocks and the density and where they should naturally form. And that means we get things like these natural clusters of boulders at the forest edge underneath the cliffside.
Yeah.
And on that note, you might have noticed that the cliffs have been dramatically improved in how they shape.
So that's why they're so dense there.
We also see things like the natural clumping of vegetation caused by seed dispersal. This is controlled per species, so we can get better emulation of their unique growth patterns and create a much more realistic environment. And we also calculate the slope aspect, which is the exposure to vegetation to solar radiation and other environmental factors. And this allows us different species to flourish in different conditions, as we can see on different sides of this valley. Then over larger scale, we calculate the age and vitality of each tree individually to drive exactly how high they should be, but also the color of their leaves.
Yeah.
Now this is
so all these things deciding what grows where, what gathers where, you then tie all that into resource gathering, and you have this like real natural dynamic kind of resource system that is just formed completely organically. People will find the best spots to harvest a certain resource, cut down a certain tree, mine a certain node. All these places will slowly be discovered throughout the course of the game, and these natural hotspots, natural resource-rich areas will start to form. I don't know if that would be part of me, like I don't know if it's ever really been done before in any video game. So part of me is like, can you leave that to the game to decide, or should this be more controlled? Should it be more controlled by the devs? But this is what the bigger implication of Genesis is that all this, it's how it's going to affect resource gathering. On the base level, it's resource gathering, but you go further, it's going to affect where exploration players can go and find and survey the land and find these rich deposits of certain resources, sell that data to another trader, to another gatherer or miner, who can then go to the location and mine it and gather it themselves. This is all propagated by this system. It's not all manually done by the devs, which means it's like real, true exploration, ultimately. But again, part of me is a little bit apprehensive. I don't know if, I don't know. I'm like, should this be in the hands of the algorithm, in the hands of the tech, or should this be control? What if you just get like these really weird clumps of one resource in one area because that's where Genesis determined it should be? This really caught me off guard. Seasons. Something I kind of always thought about with Star Citizen, but I thought, well, is it really necessary? Like, can they pull that off? But he talks about it in a second. Seasons is another really cool systemic, like natural thing that forms gameplay later down the line. Exactly, Roscoe. That's what I was thinking. It does help with that. It does help with people just data mining and finding shit. Does seasons mean orbits? Well, they always spoke about orbits, but we didn't hear anything about that. They always talked about orbital mechanics, but we haven't had an update on that. My guess is that it's just going to be some sort of timer thing, but let's carry on.
The only thing that will drive the color of the leaves, we're going to introduce the concept of seasons to the game. And this will mean our planets will evolve through the year, and we'll be able to shed leaves from trees and have the grass wither in winter.
Yeah, which is nuts. There is seasons.
So as you're starting to see, all these...
So again, seasons, it's going to tying into resource acquisition. Certain resources abundant in certain parts of the season on certain planets and certain systems, right? So if one resource is really abundant in one planet for its season, that's going to be a hotspot for that resource, for that resource node, for those resource nodes. And then, like, just naturally, that's going to die down, and maybe another planet or moon in another system, has its season for another particular resource, and then suddenly that one becomes a hot spot. And then you have this thing which seemingly seems completely pointless, well, not pointless, but something that seems quite shallow on the surface. You're making the planets look prettier and it's more immersive, blah, blah, blah. This actually has hopefully deep gameplay implications, which is why I think this panel was underrated, a really good panel. It actually has like these really cool, interesting gameplay implications that help drive a dynamic economy.
These rules, all this data, it's all coming together to create what we call truly emergent biomes.
Yeah, I agree, General Si.
Let's have
a little bit dry to
look
start
at
off things
varies
off with.
over a much larger scale.
Maybe I consider send me a DM, dude. Thank you. Didn't get a chance to chat to you, but thanks for coming by, Icon City. I appreciate it. Quanta City Apartments, Bounty Hunting 2.0, hacking missions. There's quite some subject that had much attention at first and went silent. Yeah, definitely some things would have been nice to hear more about. Bounty Hunting V2 is a big one. The LODs and everything are certainly improved. There's a link on X of Benoit talking about orbits. Oh, okay. Yeah, they've been answering a lot of questions after the con.
Just like in real life... Oh, thank you. Just like in real life, our areas should vary, even by traveling a few kilometers. If you get in a helicopter and fly over the Alps, it all looks a bit snowy, but when you look closer, it's constantly changing. And we're now able to accurately represent that with our changing data. Another very important factor to mention is the distant look. In this screenshot, you don't...
So Benoit apparently said the rotation of the planets around their star is still in the pipeline or even already coded, but put on hold for the moment for the moment because it has a big effect on the gameplay. Wow, interesting. But that's good to know, Sideshow. Thanks. Again, one of those things you think they would have addressed here, but not part of Genesis, I guess.
I don't see a single tree, and yet the terrain is still green. We previously did that with artist-made lookup tables that told the planet what color to be at what position. But that wasn't going to work with all our new data and our far more complex spawning. Now we have a systemic solution. The planet shader is able to intelligently evaluate what's going to spawn there using the same rule sets that cause the assets to spawn there when you get there. That means we can sample the sort of color that is going to project onto the orbital view and use it. We get a far better accuracy from the result. Together, by creating rules and authoring data that works, we create a continuously varying planet that sets the scene for the incredible exploration gameplay I know you guys are going to have. But how have we done this without compromising on performance?
So yeah, with all this new data sets and these physically based spawning rules, you're probably wondering, how is this going to handle in your CPU? We don't want to melt anyone's CPU.
Thanks, Ruben.
So we've redesigned all of this tech to work much more efficiently than before, and now it can run on many cores. This allows it to be run perfectly well on both the CPU and the GPU. So we've redesigned our framework so that we can run it at both and swap between them freely. Now, the benefit of this is we can do things like, first off, move the terrain system to the GPU, and we've now done that to get some incredible performance improvements, but we then also cache the results in something we call a virtual terrain texture. I'll give you a quick demo of this now. This is now vastly faster than the previous system, but it also allows us to generate the terrain in much higher resolution, which means all the popping you can see on the mountains as we're approaching, all of that should be completely eliminated on the right-hand side of the screen.
Wow. I mean, the popping doesn't even bother me that much. But better's better. GPUs are going to melt. GPU's like, no, you're playing Star Citizen again.
We've gained by making our terrain system more efficient. We've been able to introduce some improvements, including high-resolution ground textures, proper blending between surface types, and, of course, better tiling. If you're familiar with any of our planets, we've taken off all the assets so you can see the issue. And now how it looks, you don't see those lines going at all.
Yeah, better. Much better.
And one more.
Oh, microtech's the worst.
With the terrain data cached on the GPU, like Ali said, we can perform the scattering there too, which is significantly faster. All those algorithms that we've used to generate those first bits can run there without being more expensive on your CPU. And it also means the results are directly there on the GPU. We can render straight from them.
Oh, yeah. We always like improved performance.
That allows us to have dramatically more density in our new system. We can render objects directly without having to go via the CPU every frame. We also cull at different levels of granularity, with bigger groups in the distance and individual assets up close. Just as a demonstration, this is the sort of density you can expect on microtech today. And in a second, we'll flip over to what you can expect from the new upcoming tech.
Jesus.
In a second, we're going to turn on the culling groups debug so you can see. These are the groups that we create of those trees and of the terrain. And as we get closer, we shrink them so we're more intelligently rendering what we need without having to assess each tree individually.
Please let me cut down some of those trees.
All the way down to the ground.
But when you zoom in, there is some space. Like, you could make a little outpost in there. No one would ever see it. It's so dense, though. Like, ground vehicles... You're not going to take a ground vehicle there anytime soon. Not unless you can, clear a lot of the land.
So to recap some of the things you've seen here in phase one, we had data-driven rules based on physically based data, generating emergent biomes that continuously vary across our planets to get infinite possibilities. And we've achieved this with much greater density than before and much faster rendering. And we also achieved seamless transitions from ground to space with zero popping. So now that we've got all this tech, it's time to talk about how art might make use of this. So for that, I'll hand you to the next phase towards Sebastian Schroeder.
Thank you, guys.
Schroeder.
Thank you.
Got a video on it, Glitch.
No,
Thank you.
Wow. Thank God there's only 20 of you, otherwise I'd be nervous. Right, thanks for having me. I'm here on behalf of the Planet Content team, and we're very excited to finally show you some of the things we've been working on. As you've just seen from Will and Ali, the system keeps growing in both complexity and capability, so our libraries have to grow alongside it.
I like this guy's
Wait,
voice.
should I click? No. No, I should click. Yeah, click. Oh, there we go. So, our goal with the content is to provide the content that the system needs to populate every corner of every planet with realistic environments. And this content is what this phase of Genesis is all about, emergent biomes. For our first example of today, it's almost a shame Will left because it's about moisture, but let's look at very high moisture and medium to high temperature.
Yeah. See, when I talk about things in this panel being far away, it's more like this sort of stuff, the swamps and the redwood. I don't even know what planet or moon swamps would exist on. Grab your banjos. Got a real pretty mouth. No worries, Walla. This was the closest replication to swamps I've seen. It reminds me of such a home, really? Even more than Hunt Showdown? Terra? Okay. Terra, fair play. Yeah. Terra could work with swamps. I like the Empire Strikes Back reference.
Thanks, that did look really good. So, for swamps, we obviously made vegetation that feels at home in or near water. But before we dive in, allow me to give you a quick primer on our approach to authoring plants. Most species can survive in a fairly wide range of climate conditions, but will only thrive if the conditions are ideal.
Cool.
To support this concept, we author our vegetation assets to describe the full growth cycle of a species. If the conditions aren't ideal, they may not grow to full maturity or look their best, but the species can still exist. So let's have a closer look.
So again, you're going to have like people fighting for these areas or vying for these areas, or at least lots of people, crafters, gatherers, etc., thriving in these areas to basically mine the best shit. Like if somebody discovers that this particular tree or resource grows really well in this one area, you'll want to, you'll want to control it, wouldn't you? You want to be able to keep coming back and getting more and more from it. Keep it out of the hands of other people, and it's all naturally occurring, which is really cool. It's the gameplay this sort of stuff generates is really cool, potentially, at least.
We made plants like this Alternatera and the iris.
Exactly, Raven.
We also need the aquatic ones to float on the water surface, like the water lily or the pickerel weed. This willow and the one after, a Chinese tallow tree, while comfortable near water, we can also use to replace some of the more aged assets used to seeing elsewhere in the game. The last one, it's taking a bit longer now, but the last one, I'm gonna wait. The last one, you may not see used much in other biomes, but it's a very iconic one for the swamp, the bald cypress.
God damn. It's certainly a unique
another feature
biome.
we need to make a swamp experience a proper one.
They can do more with it, right?
protection.
Little boats,
Over the last year or two,
still
a lot of work
houses,
has gone into improving the way our water
creepy
reacts and renders.
swamp creatures.
So naturally, we wanted to make a biome that highlights those advances. Let's have a brief look at what it's like being inside the swamp.
There are fish too.
As you walk or swim through the water, you may come across obstacles like logs or debris floating on the surface. They will react to the player character and can be pushed out of the way.
Listen to us, Star Citizens. Oh my god, he pushed the tree out of the way.
We were
That's
also pleasantly
why.
surprised when we first saw how the water simulation systemically affects assets floating on the water surface, making for some really immersive moments.
Yeah, I don't know what else they could do with swamps. What else can they do with swamps? Some sort of maybe like some sort of IR reduction. Well, I guess it wouldn't reduce it, would it? I'm thinking about other sort of gameplay implications of being in or around a swamp potentially. Fishing. Well, that's not even going to be in 1.0. Didn't Chris confirm that?
Now, before I get to our second use case of the day, a quick disclaimer. Obviously, all the things you're seeing here today we're still actively working on, but this one in particular, it's a bit early in the process. So let's have a look at extreme object density next. With the data saying we should have high rainfall and sunlight year-round, it's the perfect condition for our next biome to appear.
Jungle's insane as well. Jungle, CIG? Jesus, man. Frickin' jungles. Yeah, maybe Meatball. Different tiers of different resources in different areas. Moonshine. Malakina. Ramo. Okay. Big time Predator vibes, yeah. Further, this dense makes exploration so much more interesting because you can just see the floor when you're flying over. I know, it does. There has to be stuff in there though, right? You have to fly over and maybe see a glimpse of a building slightly. And then, because it's so dense, you're going to have to land like a kilometer out, possibly. And then make your way in on a bike or on foot and stuff, you know? It's all really cool. Potentially really cool. Then obviously also needs to be something when you get there, which they do address later on in this panel.
Considering everything you've just seen is still very much work in progress, the gameplay capture team really did a great job showing our work in the best possible light.
Yes. True.
With jungles, we wanted to explore the concept of vertical stratification, as they are the prime example for that. What it means is that you have horizontal layers of microbiomes defined by
Joshua, I love that.
Defined by the species that thrives with the amount of sunlight and rain that still reaches there. The floor, herb and brush layer, we could almost do before, obviously missing the density. But now we also have the option to add variation to the tree layer by dynamically spawning epiphytes like lianas, orchids, or bromeliads, attached to trunks and canopies of other assets.
Also, you know, biome-specific, like you guys said, hunting, be great to go into a jungle, like looking for a certain creature, and you this dense, the jungle this dense and this vast, if you're hunting some specific thing, especially something that like lives in the trees, you genuinely would feel like hunting. Like you'd actually have to keep your eyes up, get like maybe a thermal scope and stuff, you know, you have the right gear for it, maybe some sort of anti-heat flight suit or armor or whatever, right? Just imagining. Yeah, FPS combat could be really good in the jungle as well.
With this and improved density is what will finally allow us to make convincing jungles. And the best part is, we don't even need a lot of different species to create what we refer to as a canvas of a biome. The idea being that we can vary what kind of forest you're in by adding or replacing the plants that visually stand out the most. Now, to get us started on our stratification, we made epiphytes like the Epiprenum and the bromeliad, including a potted version for your hab. Then obviously you need lianas for a jungle. And we also made agrias, which add character to the herb and tree layer.
The herpy tree layer?
For tall trees, we decided on a fairly generic rubber tree, as its different growth
they have
stages
herpes
serve as a
now?
nice foundation for all height levels. And that's pretty much it, what we need to make a pretty good base for jungle.
Crazy. Sneak.
Now, for our third and last use
Star
case,
piece.
let's pretend the data indicates
Star
regular
piece.
rainfall and moderate temperatures. This climate would support a lot of different forests, but we also
Yes,
wanted to use this
Roscoe,
opportunity
exactly.
to explore extreme scale. And they're just really cool.
Look around, look around. Redwoods. Big old trees. It's going to be nuts the first time we walk into anywhere this dense in Star Citizen. We're not used to it. I'm going to look around and go, now what? It's the gameplay, man. They had to get this in here. In reality, this is never going to happen. You're dead in the first 10 seconds. Especially the way they fly right now. I met Bayor of Red Turns actually this year. Yes.
Now, for this one, we first looked at the different redwood biomes on Earth and tried to analyze what the most defining species of them are. With this understanding, we then decided on the following plants to allow for a fairly universal redwood forest that will easily support variation across continents and planets. A fairly common family of species for the ground levels of all redwoods are ferns, in our case, the sword fern. We also made a huckleberry variant to provide some visual density for the shrub layer. To add some Jurassic vibes, we made tree ferns, as they can be found in New Zealand's redwood forests. The most important one, though, are obviously sequoias, and they ended up being one of our most complex sets yet.
Jeez, look at this
As
thing.
it turns out, they can grow to be fairly ridiculous in size. It keeps going.
Scorched earth for the day 2.
Now,
1,000-year-old
one thing
tree.
our game's foliage is sorely missing is the ability to properly react to what's happening around it. The goal here is to unify all forces from all sorry for the horrible rhyme. All forces from all sources, wind, characters and creatures, ships, explosions, and whatever else, and have the vegetation behave accordingly. Now, as part of our tech improvements, we will be implementing a GPU-based simulation that's fit for our game scale. For now, we've set up the ferns with our existing CPU-based one to
Suddenly everybody's like, thank God for the FPS scan, because you're not going to see anyone in this freaking place. You're not going to see anybody here or in the jungle or in the swamp without an FPS scan. And of course, if they're wearing an anti-FPS scan suit, then you're screwed as anyway. But yeah, like Azaban said, like sniping here is going to be it's a sniper's dream. Any kind of FPS combat in here is going to be completely different to anything we have right now. It's going to have to be so slow and tactical, like Armor style. Everyone's cool till the trees start speaking.
better visualize what it will feel like to walk amongst those giants. Also, with the biomes on our planets now being defined by where an individual object wants to appear, you can expect a lot more happy accidents by having species invade different biomes, making for some unique locations, hopefully. Surely.
Yeah, crazy. Depends on whether the tool has a seed option. Does it, Reaps? I don't know what that
before
means.
Before I get to this PF stage, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody involved, especially my team in Frankfurt for doing such amazing work and being all around great people. And also to all of you guys. I really hope you have a fantastic CitizenCon. This concludes this phase of Genesis, so please welcome Ian to the stage so I can tell you all about the next one.
Yeah, super cool. I mean, the whole time I'm watching this, I'm thinking, yeah, looks amazing, looks great, but what am I going to do there? Why do I need to go? Why do I need to walk through a dense forest? Why do I need to walk through a dense jungle or swamp? Like,
hello, CitizenCon!
Obviously, they do answer more of that throughout this panel and the rest of the con.
those new planets and biomes were pretty, right? But it's time from Phase 3 Civilization to give you some stuff to do.
I spoke to this guy on the Friday night, and he was super hyped about doing this presentation.
Let's talk about location density.
Archaeology.
We've emulated nature as well as we can to make sure our planets are physically based and realistic, and our biomes are emergent. But it's time to start populating the verse, because where there's people, there are their lives and the structures they build. So it makes sense that whenever you go and explore these planets, that you find their lives. And what's even more important is that when we make these structures, that they use and they follow the same rules as our biomes, such as the jungles and the swamps.
Oh, he's Elfian, BB.
But
oh, okay.
Before we continue, let's first take stock as to where we are now. At the moment in the verse, we have these custom, beautifully made locations, such as Ghost Hollow, we've got our distribution centers, or even just some outposts. And these have all been handcrafted by our designers and artists to hit that benchmark. And they've been working directly on the planet. However, going forward, this doesn't really scale with how we want to go forward with the game.
No, it doesn't.
Server meshing is about to arrive, and we're going to have a way higher player count. So those 73 bunkers across Stanton just won't cut it. But in general, it's also pretty barren. There's not much for you to explore and find stuff out there. So there's no exploration gameplay. You haven't really put your character to use for the way that you should. So this means we need to go bigger, which means we need to change our workflow.
Yes.
And with any workflow means we need to first establish a new benchmark. So with our new benchmark, we are ensuring quality and improve on our previous work and make it even better. And any location that you'll find needs to have its own unique personality and no repetition.
I don't know how they're going to achieve this. No repetition. I don't. I know it doesn't seem possible. I don't think there's enough assets to create enough variance. There's bound to be I guess no repetition could mean anything. You can have the exact same cluster of buildings, but if one of them's in a slightly different position than all the others, that wouldn't be repetitive. But I don't see how they're going to avoid it.
We don't want you to find the same location twice. This also means that this is your exploration and your findings. So when you go out there and explore with your Carrack or with your Corsair, is that whatever you find, you can share with your orgs or with your friends. As for that density, if you fly down to the planet, we want you to find something, let's say, every 100 clicks. But
I think that's a good
improve the mission
distance
experience.
too.
So when you stay more on the planet, you're more immersed and you go from location to location. Just keep going. So going forward, we are modularizing all our existing locations and assets. And we're basically making a library of buildings and layouts that we'll be using to no longer work directly on the planet. The neat thing, all these modules and assets can be iterated upon and tested right in the editor for all the designers and artists, to ensure fun gameplay and interactive sandbox activity, and also make sure all the mission stuff is there. Basically, we're building a toolkit. First and foremost, we've got our art style and branding. We've got things like Frontier for our settlements.
Exactly, Roscoe.
We've got high-tech for the emergency shelters, but also utilitarian, like our bunkers and distribution centers. The richer the data, the richer these locations will be. Secondly, they all have a function. We've got mining for our mining outposts, farming for the farmsteads, or just places where people live. The function of the place will define the way the place looks as well, and its form. And last but not least, the people as well, the faction and their loadouts. We've got lawful people like the new Citizens for Prosperity and Pyro, unlawful, such as Xenofred, and sometimes not even no one. And the place needs to look a bit, derelict. In different places, you'll find different people.
Yeah, so there are, talking of repetition, there are a lot of variables here that will alter and change the locations. There is definitely going to be a lot less repetition. It'll be harder to find the repetition for sure, because interspersed between all the different types of settlements, you'll have all these different variables driving the way the settlement looks and behaves, where it's placed, how it's placed.
So, now that we've made our toolkit and we've defined all this new stuff, let's start building thousands of locations. Yes, I said thousands. So, to avoid the same issue of working directly in the planet, I'd like to introduce to you Starchitect.
Got him.
What StarArchitect allows us to do is directly on a planetary scale scatter all these new libraries and modules and assets and no longer work directly on the planet. And it uses the same logical rule set as our emergent biomes. And it also gives us full control over the data that we set on these locations. So expect locations in places where they make sense. Let's kind of look at all this new Genesis data and all these new libraries and chuck it into StarArchitect and see what it gives us. As you can see, we're now able to make full-size locations, and they will look completely different based on where you'd find them. The layouts are controlled by the rules, and it will reflect its place in the verse.
Yeah.
We've got farms.
They had scrap yards in there as well.
But even our older locations, such as the bunkers that you find on Stanton.
Damn, those UGFs. Nuke them. So sick of looking at those things, exterior and interior-wise. Yeah, I do like that, Solomon. Me too. The clusters, the nodes.
So, let's look at an example and kind of use the tool to really, make a location. We can define the rules, as I've mentioned a couple times by now. So for our mining outpost, it wants to be near a resource. We can specify what this resource needs to be. But we can also give it suggestions where sometimes you'd find it here and sometimes you wouldn't. If the location has refineries, it might want to be near water to refine the resources. Then secondly, we can define what buildings should be there. So obviously we need mining buildings, houses for people to live as well, and even power buildings that we can leverage with the resource network. StarArchitect will intelligently figure out where to place these and what needs to be at the location. Next up, farms.
Farms. We still don't know anything about farming, though.
Not every plant can live in every temperature, but the same with soil type. Only certain plants can be in certain grounds. And
Can't be hard to pull off,
the seed map to determine what plants you would find there. What are the harvestables? As for the targets, again, farm buildings, obviously, power buildings, houses, but even animals, such as our beloved quasi-grazers. And last but not least, derelict ships. We've got these all over the place currently. Rules, well, they'd be close to
about some farming in the base building. Did they? Okay.
Air, because I would be shot down. But even in harsh...
This is an interesting one. Like derelict ships potentially near rules based on AA or something. I mean, that's cool, right? It's like if you see all these derelict ships, you know there is something up nearby, potentially. Crashing around mountains and things. All logical places where you'd expect to find something. I like that idea.
Flight conditions, such as mountains or low visibility.
Ranches, that's true. They did talk about ranches.
Targets, well, crash ship parts, of course. Sometimes you'd find the full remains of a javelin, and the other time you might just find the nose of a starfare laying around.
Yeah.
So, let's
talk
about
exploration gameplay.
Sure,
works
we
into
can scatter
exploration
all these
gameplay.
locations everywhere on the planet, and you'll find them in places they make sense, but we can do better. You don't just want to find an outpost completely on its own, right? We want to make sure it really feels like people have built their lives here.
Not exploration,
so,
really.
Let's talk about some missing bits. We want to tell tighter stories, such as the people's lives, but also logical exploration. If I find one thing, I expect to find something similar or something else nearby. We also need more data control. What defines one mining outpost being different from the other ones, aside from the harvestables?
Yeah.
And also give the narrative developments. Make sure, people build near rivers, on mountains. They build near town halls. They build near distribution centers. So to hit that bit of our benchmark, we make sure that locations are near each other and group them together. The effect it gives is a fully developed landscape with vistas and points of interest all over. And we group them together in what we like to call a cluster, like this one, that has 13 locations.
Infer, thank you.
Let's talk about clusters. Clustering means generating locations near other locations. So, for example, if you find a distribution center, just like in the verse currently, I would find forward operating bases next to them. But if you go even further out, you'd find mining outposts to funnel those resources to the FOBs. Go out even further, you'd find caves around them, because that's where they might find some of the gems. And then we can even specify the data on a cluster level. All of the factions that live at this whole cluster, any mining outpost, that would be the same people, but also what commodities they sell, to find on what resource you'd find.
And then hopefully you arrive somewhere like that and it's just a buzz with NPCs and people going about their day, their business, working the mines, transporting goods, etc., etc. Heavily protected if it needs to be.
So let's look at an example.
Should do, T-Ref, yeah.
We have our mining cluster. Again, we can define what rules we should have. Rules, well, near a resource, just like our mining outpost, but also it needs to be on a lawful planet. We can target on a planetary scale.
Hey, God, what's up, man?
They need protection. As for the targets, well, caves, mining outposts, but even trade posts. Let's go to the other side of the spectrum. Before I do so, I forgot data. We can, on a cluster level, specify, again, what mineral commodities, but also what harvestable types you'd find are in that region. Now let's look at the other side of the spectrum, an unlawful cluster. What rules? Well, they need to be far away from any other cluster, because they want to be isolated and do their evil deeds on their own. Yeah. And also on an unlawful planet, such as somewhere in the Pyros system. For the targets, outlaw outposts, crash ships, because they would shoot them down, and also ruins from just places they just completely overrun. The data on this one, you'd find specific loadouts, and they'll be using weapons that you wouldn't find any in other legal system. And these weapons will be sold at the shops in these regions.
Oh, that's cool.
So, now that we have a cluster...
So then if that's like a, I don't know, unlawful faction, you'd have to build a rep with them potentially to go and see what they're selling. Yeah, the cluster system is cool. It's all logical. It's like logical progression of the world building, right? It's just all it's intuitive to the player ultimately, which makes sort of exploration and your thought process when playing the game a little bit more intuitive, which leads to results in the game. How much of this is actually tested already and how much of this is a concept, I don't really know. I don't think this is all far out, but within a year maybe. One of those things that they'll probably be like, oh yeah, we're putting in this into 4.x and this introduces Genesis or something, right? And you're going to log in and everything's going to look a lot different, or, it's going to be one of those sort of patches, I feel like.
Just like our locations, we can put clusters near other clusters, and we group them together, ranging between 10 to 15 locations each. And we group this into what we call a sector.
Sector.
Like this one, that has about 120 locations.
Control the sector with your org.
However, on a planetary scale, we can define how many sectors we should have, with each their own data and persona. And every single one of these locations is now ready for the mission system to hook up and give you gameplay. And for you to find a bunch...
Is it though? Is it ready for the mission system now? We haven't even seen it in game yet, but I see where he's going with this, and this is what's interesting about it. The amount of content that they can just create potentially, very quickly with these systems talking to each other. I can't remember what they're doing with the new mission system, but they want it to be able to just plug in to Genesis, I guess, and just generate content, and then designers can create content in between it all to create just this massive depth of breadth of missions that you can play. You could play for 100 hours and potentially, hopefully, that's what I'd like to see, is that, you could play for 100 hours and not come across the same missions that someone else has come across. But what I'm getting at, though, is that we have more than enough space. We just need to fill it, and this is the start.
Bunch of places on your own.
I don't think so anymore, Raisin. I think they're doing something else. Something similar, but not Quanta.
Can you guess the number? We've got about 3,042 locations. And again, this means that as architects, we're just able to, on a planetary scale, just define how many locations we need, what you'd find there, and to just give that full identity. Thank you for listening. And I won't just see you in the verse, but I'll see you in a denser verse.
I know Star Sim's the new Quanta, but I haven't had any confirmation that it's working the same as Quanta, so I'm not going to say it's working the same as Quanta anymore. So I don't know. I'm not going to call it Quanta. I'm not going to say it behaves the same as Quanta. I'm not going to say it's 90% NPCs doing everything in the background anymore. There's definitely going to be a dynamic economy and things, but if it's being whether it's being dictated by the same rules as Tony Z's Quanta anymore, I just don't know.
However, this was only the first phase of
Definitely
civilization.
Thank God.
Let me introduce you to the stage, the person who will introduce life at these locations, Francesco Raccucci.
Like, they talked more about player economy this year than anything else.
So, hi everybody. Benvenuti a CitizenCon. So, where are we today? So, my name is Francesco Raccucci, and I'm the director in CIG. Welcome to the next step of phase 3. We will look into how life adapts to the laws of nature and how all the NPCs can interact pretty much with these incredibly vast and dense worlds that we just saw. So up to this point, we have seen how we are building the worlds. We start from the physical data set, and this is to make sure that what you see is not just beautiful and realistic, but also physically accurate. So the distribution of the elements that we have seen and the location and the POIs are influenced by geology, mission, narrative, and the lore. Those locations cannot be lifeless. We want the planets to basically leverage the space that emerge with life.
Yeah.
So from an AI perspective, I will
There's so much emergent in this whole
worlds into 4
panel.
macro groups. Emergent environment, that is everything we have just seen being built out of the physical data set.
Yes.
User-made locations.
Good.
So this includes everything that our designers or you players will create in the world. So something that is mankind-made and not predefined in the environment. Interior of those locations. Now, this is very connected to the previous point. The difference is that they represent usually a confined space where there is much more tight interaction. And for NPCs, it's a lot about interaction with objects that we are usually used to in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
And then the day and night cycle. So in essence, the passage of time. That so far didn't have really a lot of impact on the gameplay.
No.
So to allow life to respect this world and conform to the rules...
Except make you completely unable to play the game because it's so dark and we have no night vision. That's what day-night cycle does at the moment.
...this environment defines, well, we want to improve our tools and workflow, and we want to distance ourselves as much as possible from a designer-driven approach.
I think you're right, Roscoe.
First,
Emergent has replaced procedural.
It can be prone to bugs, but also because the scale of the worlds that we've just seen are very hard to be, designer-driven in the markup. So we want to improve this workflow, and we will see how manual markup is also not usually the best option. Because
optics.
With these worlds that are heavily impacted by users and changes and customization, it's very hard to know in advance where interesting things are. So today I want to show you a couple of examples of what the AI team has been focusing on to make these systems supported and scale correctly to support these vastly dense dynamic worlds. So we'll look at perception in light and dark environments and dynamic cover generation. So, attacking an outpost now must have a level of depth that goes beyond what we had. So layouts of the environment can change, vehicles may or may not be present, and PC can be anywhere.
I like this idea. So you turn up somewhere, it looks like impossible to hit at night, maybe with just you and your friend, hit it in the day, but then you think, man, night's coming, nightfall's coming. We can take a completely different approach to it. Or you can just fly out and get an A2 and bomb it, but there are immersive options if you want them.
And if it's a bright day, well, we will be more visible, but our enemies will also be more visible. And if you choose to attack at nighttime, well, we'll attack in shadows. During darkness, it's going to be a bit harder to see our enemies, but we will also be harder to be spotted. And it will give us more opportunities to be stealthy and sneaky. How do we do that? So as you see, there is also a lot of different light conditions in this outpost.
I hear Copian. The A2 isn't immersive. Well,
so in this scenario, we will start look at our perception is impacted by the day and night cycle.
Moab to deal with this poor little rabble of outlaws hiding in their crappy old outpost. The ordnance would cost more than the entire mission.
On the planetary surface, as we've seen in the outpost, natural
really, Raven?
and artificial lights are the two elements that will impact vision. And knowing that, you can use this to leverage your gameplay style to exploit basically all the environment. So what is perception? On the NPC level is the combination of data that we collect out of the senses. And vision is one of the senses and just tries to, in a way, simulates the human side ability. So designers can already tweak the perception in different ways. And one way is defining how quickly NPCs can understand what they're seeing. And the light conditions have a direct impact on how quickly an NPC will fully understand, for example, if there is an hostile in front of them. And obviously, there is condition of light that designers can control, and some others, like the day-night cycle, that they can't. So in this...
Yeah, I think they mentioned that, Aristan, during the base building panel about, bombs and things affecting the loot and other things that you could grab. Or maybe we had a talk about it at CitizenCon.
Video, we'll see two main elements. The graph on the top left and the two colorful codes.
Is it monster hunting?
Thank you. Basically represent the current light level the NPC is in and the current multiplier this light level generates to speed up or slow down the NPC.
This is cool to see this, how this works in real time.
The two cones instead represents the primary and secondary FOV. The red color means that if you stand in that location, it will result in NPC reacting the slowest to you, and the green color instead represents the quickest response. So during the night, NPC will have a hard time to understand and foresee and see things. But if they have flashlights on their helmets, they can turn it on, and this will impact their primary FOV, making still the peripheral vision a bit more uncertain. And as you see here, first of all, the NPC is patrolling with his domesticated friendly copion. This is because he wants to exploit the night vision capabilities of the animal, and it's kind of our tier 0 pets.
Yeah, that's cool. So you see like a copion attached to an NPC, you know...
That is the next dynamic things that I want to show you.
It's going to have slightly better
so when we introduced
planetary
navigation mesh the first time, our goal was really to create a systems that would support and process the environment in a very dynamic way.
Maybe they could make it so it can smell you or something as well. So being behind cover isn't enough. Yeah, going to sniff you out. So if you like, you're in a... hiding in one spot too long, and like eventually you start hearing the copion sniffing. Staroma. Q said you would have issues if they could smell you. Me? What the hell? It's a little bit out of order. But yeah, that would be cool. You know, if you hide in one spot too long, it starts triggering the copion, you start hearing this... and then you know you have to start moving, otherwise it will eventually find you. Make it happen, COG.
Our planets are just
yes, thank you, Pigtails. He's nasty. He's a bully.
First of all, and then their regions only exist when somebody's there and the NPCs are there. So essentially, environment has its purpose only when life exists. Also, let's keep in mind that even if we could export dynamically and statically those planets, so processing dynamically all a static version of the planet, this would be, first of all, wasteful and on the memory side and time-consuming. And also because we have a lot of runtime modification of the terrain, this would require us to still reparse it at runtime, and pretty much that will be almost all the time. So to generate the cover data, we want to leverage the navigation mesh system. And what we do is, as you see here, the blue polygons are basically where NPCs can walk, and the green ones are what we call cover surfaces, that are our simple representation of the environment, what NPC uses to understand if they can hide behind something and if they can shoot from some positions. So up to now, we have an approach where designer would be a designer-driven approach. Designer can define in the locations where cover was interesting. They could mark it up, either the location itself or prefabs, and then with a special entity that would just sample dynamically the environment, but would still be designer-driven. This is obviously a good approach it's also a standard approach in the gaming industry. But what about all those organic and inorganic elements that get scattered with a new system? Like if designers want to iterate on these ones, for example, and they want to change the physical data sets, those scattering tools will just change completely the layout. And what we want is that designers can do this change without being afraid of doing it because the gameplay was, predefined and controlled, and now they can just make something beautiful but also fun. Besides that, yes, we did have a prefab approach where you can build stuff out of small building blocks. This is obviously a good approach because it's, in a way, you can build stuff out of smaller version, but this creates a lot of unnecessary data. Imagine a crate, and we can say that the crate can generate cover. Now we stack 100 crates, and what happens? That we have a lot of data to generate cover that we have to process, throw away. This would just waste CPU cycles for nothing. This is why, until now, you also couldn't find an NPC in a forest like this one and see them hiding behind a tree or a rock. So enabling the dynamic generation of covers on the planet allows us to exploit all the elements of the environment. Whenever navigation mesh generates, NPC can now have a chance to fight with you hiding behind the available elements. Boulders, rock, walls, and are all useful elements right now. However, we don't have to limit ourselves to static geometries, but also vehicles can be used for cover. And as you can see, this is dynamically generating while the
I'd love to see an AI use that as cover while it's moving.
Because now it can become a source of danger for you as well. Last but not least, these systems can be just used on all the different type of navigation mesh we have, so not on the planet, but also, for example, the interiors and everything you guys construct. Because obviously, you guys will build your own locations, but you don't really mark up stuff, or you don't want to decide that, because that's going to come automatically out of the system.
True. So then it was the AI smart. This is about generating cover the AI recognizes at scale. Yeah, it's a good way to simplify it. That's basically what it is, isn't it? It's the AI will always know where cover is and will know what is usable cover, even your own buildings. Like if you build something that actually lends itself to cover for attackers, the AI will realize that. It'll find it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's clever.
So I want to show you So what I want to show you now is just like a little bit of insight of what goes behind the scene when we generate cover and navigation mesh. These are some of the steps that our system does. So we always start from the environment voxelization. What that means is we process the geometry, the physical representation of the geometries, that is a little bit simpler than usually the render mesh, and we construct it in a voxelized approach. This is also using different types of agent
Minecraft on the left.
Why so? Because obviously where a human can move is not the same as where a vehicle can move. So we can define different type of precisions and then speeding up the process where we have to, or be more precise where we cannot be to. And we can also create overrides based on different things. For example, if you crouch, you can enter into smaller locations than where you stand. This process is basically common between navigation mesh and cover. After that is generated, then we can evaluate the voxel in different ways. For example, defining where we can walk. So can we make the step with our foot over a specific voxel? Or is there something in front of that hole in the nav mesh so that we can actually cover behind? And then we can basically decide where to generate cover surfaces.
We're good. Sounds like some shit going on outside.
After the cover surfaces are generated, we can process where the cover locations are. Cover locations are a good spot for NPC to be behind the cover. So what we see here is with the introduction
this is cool
of
to see
from
the
last year,
destructible environments.
Obviously, we knew this would revolutionize how you guys are playing. And we did have to find a solution to handle all the destruction you get to. So you would destroy so much stuff in this world that we had to find a solution, right? So this is why we approach the cover generation navigation mesh as it is, because there is just no way for us to predict anything that you're doing, and we want just Maelstrom to be another trigger for word evaluation. So as you see, this is all dynamically generating, and destroying anything just makes the word be reevaluated.
Yeah.
So,
it's clever as shit.
We can have also lots of rules, so you can see that a bit here. But when things break, first they invalidate, and then when they rest, for example, we can decide when is a good moment to regenerate so that we also don't waste too much CPU cycles. The color that you see is mostly...
you can see the frames tanking in that bit of the presentation too.
Cover quality. So you see the light green is high cover, the dark green is low cover, and then we have the red that we introduced some time ago that is basically not really good cover, but if there is nothing better, well, it's better to be behind something than being, in open space. So let's just recap. What we want to do is finding a plan and having a good plan to approach life.
I don't think so, Rambo. I thought that was my fear, but it isn't.
What we want is the life to be able to systemically evaluate.
This is all incredibly, I mentioned it earlier, this is all very important for the actual gameplay moving forward as well. When you think about how this ties into crafting and resource gathering, and not this bit, but all the other bit, part of the Genesis tech, with the season, the planetary generation, the scattering of the different clusters and everything, that all then gets plugged into the missions, etc. Right? It's all content ultimately.
Evaluate all the dynamic environments that is generated. We want to improve our workflow, not only to support designers and being faster, but also support all your guys' creations. So we want the life to adapt, and this is all for making the game fun for you, so that everything comes together. So thank you all. This was phase 3. And now, let's welcome Ben Parry.
So yeah, what I got out of this panel was that he's filling these. So he gave me an example of one area, right? One outpost. That outpost had a few NPCs. There was a day-night cycle, had Copians, and that's one of potentially hundreds of those outposts on one moon or planet. My thing is that I want these outposts to have a lot of variations in the types of NPCs they can have. NPCs using vehicles, NPCs using different weapon types, NPC automated turrets, anti-air turrets, ground turrets, NPCs with railguns. I want those sort of outposts to have all those variations. Otherwise, it's going to get boring quick. If it's just always a few NPCs patrolling with a few Copians, you don't really need to approach it differently each time. It's going to get boring quickly. But if they have all these variations in potential enemy targets that you can run into, potential dangers, if there's an AI ballista or AI anti-air turret, you should have to survey the area before you even get close, especially with a ship.
This is going to be the final phase of Genesis,
this
and it's called
is a
Nature's
cool
Wrath.
Piece of the panel.
And this is where we're going to bring the very planet itself to life. So first off, let's start talking clouds. So clouds have got an atmosphere, have got to be one of my favorite visual features of our game, and they're truly awesome, but they're also completely static. Nothing has changed with them. So what we want to bring with Genesis is the evolution of clouds over time. But this isn't just some simple scrolling animation. We use the same physical data sets that drove the biomes we talked about earlier and Starchitect, and these are also now driving a physical simulation of the clouds so they can form and dissipate in realistic conditions. So this means
just when you thought clouds couldn't get any more cloudier, CIG takes it another step further.
Like the oceans, the prevailing winds, mountain ranges, and the temperature will all impact the clouds. But to complement these more dynamic clouds, we've also improved our lighting model. So it now correctly accounts for how light scatters multiple times inside a cloud. And this is important, creates much deeper lighting, and it can contrast against the sun's rays, resulting in much more vivid cloudscapes like we see on the left here. Something we're all too familiar with in Manchester.
Now, it would be awesome to bring this into context and show it on an actual location.
Yes.
Let's take a look at a quick scene to round this up.
Show me your clouds, Benoit. Yeah,
it's
I haven't seen this
yet. It's a nice day on the
yet.
surface, but something's different. The clouds are moving, but they're not just moving. They're forming naturally in changing shape. They dissipate as they glide on the atmosphere based on wind data.
My God.
Stratus and cumulus alike.
The clouds are cloudening.
Now we start seeing the new cloud shading model come into play. We are seeing enhanced occlusion beneath the cover.
It's fucking
Mordor.
Mordor.
The sunbeams out interact with the clouds and seeing the light shafts pierce through the layers. Now, as this is closing in, we can start to see the changes in visibility of the area. Light precipitation is starting.
Oh, dude.
Previously, we authored static cloud shapes, but no longer. We didn't manually place a volume here. Its presence has been informed by Genesis data. Oh, and it's not just a cloud volume. It's a weather front. Now we're trying to see the wind picking up. Terrain and rocks are getting wet. Vegetation, grass, and the overall environment are responding to the weather. The system
Just
is
like
changing
Omar,
the
yeah.
world around us.
I was going to say it.
We can see puddles being formed dynamically in the dirt, properly responding to light, reflections, and rain droplets, making it it's getting really ominous and loud in here. I can feel the danger. I think we should let this play out in the game.
Cool, cool, cool. You're going to be pressing Alt-X constantly.
Conditions are deteriorating. Severe items. We need to leave now. Get back here.
I feel like the guy from Jurassic Park trying to steal the InGen raptor eggs. Slipping on every bit of mud. Constantly falling over on my way to the mission. Before some dinosaur spits tar in my face.
Powering up, flying out. We'll need to switch to IFR. See you on the other side.
I'll take 10 helmets with star wipers, please. Look at this Aurora pilot. What a Chad. He's probably got 100 hours behind in the cockpit, but he's still flying an Aurora. Yeah, only to be eaten by a quasi-grazer. Oh, wow. Sorry, I was... Nah. Is that legit? Or you think that's for the demo? That's got to be for the demo. Imagine getting lightning strikes on your player-built base. Having to do repairs due to storms rolling through your player-built bases and stuff. That would be fucking cool. Goddamn weather is weather. The weather outside is weather. My GPU and CPU are already crying. Yeah. Imagine a dogfight in this, or a fleet battle, and fucking Stormfront rolls in. Or an FPS battle, anything. I mean, it would be cool if it could happen, if you could get lightning strikes onto planetary bases. I think that would be a great way to force players to maintain upkeep. Or even give players options to choose, you know, different places to build. You want to build somewhere where you're not going to have as much maintenance because there's not as many storms, but maybe there's less resources and less opportunity. You know, give the player that choice. Aristan, yes. Imagine. Listen to us imagining. You have no visibility. Thank God the altimeter works now. Should have got the anti-weather package, bruh. Yeah, true. Fuses could get ruptured during storms.
Wow! Wow!
Someone in Mike's chat said this is just what I want. Last leg, a 3-hour cargo run, only to be cucked by a lightning bolt. And this is my only worry with these storms is, can you detect them coming in? Like, can I know that there's a storm coming before it's right on top of me? In Pyro, we have warnings about solar flares, right? We get those pre-warnings or warnings. You get the solar flare incoming, etc., etc. My worry is that you're just on. You got like 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, to go and just run a box or do something at this outpost or fly to this location, planet side. My worry is that you're going to get trapped by a storm and it's going to turn a 5-minute session into an hour because you have to sit there and wait out the storm because maybe you don't want to risk flying through it or something. So I want to know, like, are we going to be able to sort of detect them? Are we going to have weather warnings? You'll see it forming. Yeah, now that I've seen the rest of that panel, I'm seeing that you can actually visually see the clouds rolling in, which is great. But I think there needs to be some sort of weather warnings or some sort of weather forecast that you can use. Maybe not on all planets. Maybe some planets are volatile where you should never expect that. And then you can plan accordingly. But Star Citizen is one of those games, as we all know, that just it's incredibly time consuming. And I can already hear the complaints of people saying that, yeah, man, storms are great, but I'm tired of, I wanted to just play for 20 minutes today and I was forced to like sit in fetal position and cry for an hour while I waited for the storm to pass over, right? Also, a reminder, DTOX, the vid showing the clouds rolling in was 20 times speed. Very true. Very true. Yeah, I'm wondering if there'll be, aside from just using your Mark 1 eyeballs, I'm wondering if there'll be some sort of weather warning or some way to detect incoming storms. Because most people, including me, probably ain't going to spend a lot of time looking up, checking for storms every 2 minutes. I think maybe we should get like a storm warning or some sort of notification on your mobi-glass or on your ship's HUD or on the radar or something that just gives you like every few minutes incoming storm or something. Don't know about that, Roscoe. Scanning, pathfinding ships, selling data to people about zones they're in would be sweet. Same way that I want my trading data. Okay, so that's one cool way you could do it. So you could basically buy weather forecast data. You're saying that maybe you could buy weather forecast data for certain places on a planet? That would be cool. Like maybe you can spend time surveying a planet and that gives you the weather data. But if you don't spend the time surveying the planet, you don't get the weather forecast, you don't get the weather warnings. But if you wanted to go and spend some time on a planet, you could buy that data from a data broker or an explorer who's already gathered that data for you. That would be sick. New rolling game, weather forecaster. I mean, this is why Star Citizen is so potentially so good, because it can, with its systems, Genesis, again, this is all just the first panel, this is Genesis, it creates gameplay opportunities for the game. It's not just about immersion and fidelity, it potentially creates gameplay content. I mean, that would be a really cool idea if an explorer could survey a whole planet to get the weather data for it, and then you get like warnings. This sounds like something that's obviously not going to be 1.0, but it could be a thing one day, maybe. We're high on the copium, so the imagining is flowing, but yeah.
Man, that's what we call the Falco maneuver, to get out of there. Ali, please break this down for us. What did we just see?
Yeah, so that was a combination of lots of tech we just saw that all combined together to make a really great cohesive experience. So we started with the cloud simulation, which wasn't really a cloud simulation, it's a weather simulation. The rain will appear not at random, but it's based on physically plausible conditions, so you have real weather fronts evolving across your planet all the time.
Storms are coming, Annie.
We have a host of visual effects, like the rain, and then you have the atmospheric scattering that you get under the columns of rain. We had the puddles and the splashes and all of this type of visual effects. We saw the wind developing over time, and that introduced turbulence to the flight model, making flight very challenging. And then, of course, we saw the lightning, which plays havoc with your instrumentation, but direct strikes will damage your ship, and of course, some storms will be dangerous enough to be fatal, as Ben's unlucky Aurora just found out. And these storms will sometimes be short-lived and localized, but others will be larger and potentially permanent on some planets. And this is going to restrict access via flight. I mean, players will be forced to resort to ground vehicles or even foot. And this is all going to be dynamic, meaning that you might find yourself trapped in some really unexpected situations. So we really can't wait to use all these mechanics to open up many new gameplay opportunities for All in the Verse soon.
Stocks down.
A wise yogi once said, "It's your job as a pilot to compensate and stay on course." All right, What have we learned today, guys? We've shown you an approach of encoding the rules of nature into planetary data. We've seen biomes emerge from geology, temperature, humidity, climate, weather, the physical terrain. We create denser, more diverse living planets without artists hand-placing or manually creating biomes, instead leveraging asset mapping. We've shown you a new way to make the game that can scale, to create thousands of Korean places for civilizations on planets that can be used for missions or immersion gameplay, without art and design, hand-placing locations, leveraging world design rules instead. We've seen how populations of AI and NPCs inhabiting locations dynamically adapt their understanding of the environment without custom markup by developers, allowing the creation of more playable spaces rapidly. We've shown you how light and sound also benefit from Genesis data to influence planetary environments.
We know, Citizen Ryan, we know.
And we've shown how these systems come together when weather comes into an area, changing your gameplay experience significantly. Our goal with Genesis and all of its systems is to create more worlds, better worlds, faster, by applying our tech wizardry and craftsmanship to build systems that respond to data. That's our Star Engine presentation for today, guys, for this year. Have a great CitizenCon. We'll see you next time.
Amazing first panel, really. Now that you've seen it again, there's so many implications for gameplay. So many implications from this system to potentially create fun, rewarding, immersive gameplay in the game. Excellent stuff. Thank you for watching with me, everybody. Very good panel. Thumbs up. It's a thumbs up from me.